David Gregory is probably fearing for his job now after all of those recent stories that have been in the press about how NBC hired a psychological consultant to talk to his family about why his ratings are so bad. Now, they are now disputing the story. Gregory is, and I think some people at NBC are. But I don't believe them. I believe the original story. I do think, because has had horrendous ratings this entire time, and it appears like the writing is on the wall that at some point down the road, whether, whenever his contract comes up to be renewed, for example, or maybe even a little sooner, who knows? It just seems like his time is limited and eventually he'll be let go. So he decided to step up his game and actually ask real questions to try to, up the viewership, although this is definitely too little too late. But listen to what he asked former Prime Minister of Britain, Tony Blair.
Former head of MI5 in Great Britain, a domestic service there. She said this back in 2011 about the invasion of Iraq and the impact. In my view, she says, whatever the merits of putting an end to Saddam Hussein, the war was also a distraction from the pursuit of Al-Qaeda. It increased the terrorist threat by convincing more people that Osama bin Laden's claim that Islam was under attack was correct. It provided an arena for the jihad for which he had called, so that many of his supporters, including British citizens, traveled to Iraq to attack Western forces. It also showed very clearly that foreign and domestic policy are intertwined. Actions overseas have an impact at home, which is to say that radicalization there will also come home to roost and affect Great Britain and could indeed affect America.
So we've got to liberate ourselves from this, because we're making a huge error when we end up thinking somehow it's our actions that have caused this. Let's be very clear in Afghanistan and Iraq. You can agree or disagree with either decision. We removed brutal dictatorships, allowed the people a chance to elect their government. They came out in both cases and voted, showing that they wanted such election. We gave them a massive amount of financial support. What was the disruptive effect? The disruptive effect was that very Islamist ideology I'm talking about, on the one side being pushed out of Iran from the Iranian theocracy, on the other side Al-Qaeda and other groups, and they combined to try and destabilize the wishes of the majority of the country. Now, when we weren't involved, as in Syria, they're still going and fighting jihad there. So you can carry on explaining all this by saying it's us, we provoked them, it's really, they're just trying to react against Western imperialism. It's nonsense. If it were the case, for example, that the reason why they were engaged in this terrorism in Iraq was because of the presence of American troops or British troops, you would expect when we get out, the terrorism would stop. It doesn't. And it doesn't because it's not coming from us. Right. It's coming from this ideology, and we aren't going to defeat it until we liberate ourselves from the attitude that somehow we're the cause of it.
So that was actually a really good question. What he's asking is, are you and Bush responsible for increasing terrorism around the world and making it worse? I put it in a more blunt way, but more or less that's the question that he asked. And as they continue there, he actually does push him a little bit further on it. So clearly David Gregory got the memo, and he's like, fuck, I better actually ask some difficult questions. Okay, let me get on this. But now let me address Blair's response there, because I think this is a really interesting issue, and one where two communities that I consider myself a part of, they completely disagree. So, on the one hand, you have the atheist community, which basically says the idea that the West is responsible for jihad and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, it's absurd because the ideology exists in and of itself. Like, you could have people who believe in jihad and they could be members of Al-Qaeda, and it doesn't matter if the West, went into Iraq or Afghanistan, they're going to try to do jihad anyway, and they're dangerous people anyway, and you should go after them anyway because it's a terrible thing and it's a horrible ideology. Sharia is disgusting. And then you have, on the other side, you have the progressives, where they say, well, look, we can only be responsible for our own actions. And our actions where we went into Iraq, we went to Afghanistan, and we, poked at the hornet's nest, and then all of a sudden the problem of terrorism got worse. So we kind of got to look at ourselves, look in the mirror here to assign blame before we start talking about other people and before we start talking about Islam. Now, who's right and who's wrong? Well, they're both right, and they're both wrong. So the atheists are right in the sense that, is it true that there's always going to be people who want to kill Americans and who believe in jihad and who are members of Al-Qaeda and the Taliban anyway, no matter what the West does? Absolutely! There's no arguing against that. Of course, if you are somebody who, reads the Quran and you have a literalist interpretation and you're a hardliner and you sympathize with the Al-Qaeda movement, then yeah, of course, there's always going to be people who fall into that level of extremism, just like there's people who fall into, the version of the American Taliban, whether it's Christian dominionists or people who join the KKK or people who bomb abortion clinics. There's always going to be that kind of ideology. There's no doubt about that. But the progressives are right in this sense, that that's a straw man to say that progressives believe that without the West, there would be no Al-Qaeda. No. I mean, maybe there's a handful of, Alex Jones followers who might believe that, but what progressives are saying is, we made it worse. We're not saying we're blaming us for Al-Qaeda and the Taliban existing. What we're saying is, as a result of our policies and as a result of us getting involved in the Middle East and doing drone strikes that kill civilians and killing over 100,000 civilians in Iraq and killing more civilians in Afghanistan, what we've done is we've now given the extremist people in the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, we've given them political cover. So they can go into the different towns and villages that have been affected by American drone strikes that kill children or grandmas, as we've covered on the show, or when they hit wedding parties. They get to go in and say, oh, isn't that a shame? Look what the Americans did. And, oh, you were a moderate before. What's wrong with you? Here you are thinking the Americans might have been trying to help you out, trying to make your life better. Is killing your aunt making your life better? When they killed your son, how do you feel now? So put us in power. We'll protect you. Come join the Taliban. We'll protect you. Come join Al-Qaeda and get revenge for what happened to your kids. They didn't deserve that. So what you do is you provide an argument for the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, and that is their number one recruitment tool now. It's not my opinion. That's a fact. In fact, Vice did a great documentary about that where they show these Taliban training centers. You have the first argument they make is, isn't it a shame? All your friends, we all have friends that have gotten killed by the Americans. Don't you want to kill the Americans? Don't you want to spread Sharia? And now all of a sudden, before they would have said no, now they say, fuck yeah, they killed my friend. Absolutely. No question about it. And there's been studies on this. One was done by, I think, Peter Bergen and Paul Cruikshank, and they came up with the term the Iraq effect, where they said, well, this is what happens when you kill civilians. Or the CIA calls it blowback, unintended consequences of an interventionist foreign policy. I'm having trouble talking today. I'll try to sort this out. Unintended consequences of an interventionist foreign policy. And the numbers have literally increased. It's not like, hey, it's theoretical. Hey, let's discuss it. Hey, what's your opinion? I'll give you my opinion. No, we can actually look at the numbers. And it turns out that now there are more Al-Qaeda operatives. Now there are more members of the Taliban. Now there's more members of Al-Nusra Front, which is another jihadist group. Now there's more members of ISIS, another jihadist group. Northern Mali is now basically Al-Qaedistan. The fight in Syria, most of the rebel movement now are jihadists, and they're trying to set up a Sharia state in Syria. So now it's more widespread, and there's been a new spark because American imperialism has upped the numbers because we've helped them recruit. So both sides are right and both sides are wrong, but here's what I could tell you for sure. Tony Blair is full of shit, He's playing this stupid game, like trying to paint a straw man, like, oh, these people, they're blaming America and they're blaming Britain for starting Al-Qaeda. How crazy are they? No, that's not what they're saying. What everybody's saying is, jackass, you made it worse.